All right, everyone, buckle up. Today's deep dive takes us straight into the heart of ancient Chinese mythology. We're talking about Nüwa, a goddess, creator, powerful figure, the whole 9 yards. Her story, it's like peeking behind the curtain of early societies, especially when it comes to, gender roles and how power worked way back when.
What really gets me about Nüwa is how her story isn't just some made-up myth. It's like a cracked open window right into how early Chinese society was structured, especially about gender roles, and how power dynamics played out.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Totally. Mythology meets social commentary. We've got the best seats in the house. Okay, so one of the most famous stories about Nüwa involves her and, of course, her hubby, Fuxi. Picture this. Total devastation. A flood so massive, we're not just talking about a little rain delay here. This makes Noah's Ark look like a bathtub toy. Only 2 survivors, 2, on a single lonely mountaintop, Nüwa and Fuxi. Talk about a meet cute with some serious pressure.
That image, those last 2 humans alone after a catastrophe, it speaks volumes about what those early societies worried about, everything riding on their shoulders. It highlights that very human need to keep things going, especially when nature throws its weight around.
No kidding. The fate of humanity resting on a first date. Talk about high stakes. But they were up for the challenge. Repopulating the earth was definitely on the to-do list. Fuxi, ever the practical one, was like, let's do this marriage thing. But of course, it's not that simple. Some versions of the story say they were siblings, which, well, adds a whole other layer of complexity to things, right?
The sibling aspect. It probably reflects that shift from matriarchy to patriarchy in early societies. Marrying within a clan or lineage, keeping power and resources all in the family, that was huge. It wasn't always about love as much as holding on to leadership,
Power couples throughout history. Who knew? So back to our potential lovebirds. Nüwa, strong, independent woman that she is, wasn't going to settle for just any proposal. She wanted a sign, some celestial thumbs up. They decided to light fires on different mountaintops. If the smoke merged, it's destiny, baby.
That whole idea of needing divine approval, even for marriage, not just a Chinese thing. Think about it. Across so many cultures, it's about order, legitimacy. People wanted a higher power to weigh in, even on personal stuff.
Makes sense. So, smoke test. Pass with flying colors, they were meant to be. But Nüwa, always one step ahead, throws down another challenge. A rolling millstone race. Picture these giant stones hurtling down the mountain. They meet perfectly at the bottom. It's a match made in heaven, or at least on a very steep slope. Makes you wonder if they, nudge those stones a little, right?
Right. But again, that quest for a sign, for validation from somewhere beyond themselves, it speaks to that human need for order, for knowing that things happen for a reason.
Totally. Okay, so 2 for 2 on the compatibility test. But Nüwa, full of surprises, challenges Fuxi to a foot race. She's thinking, I'm faster, I make the rules. But Fuxi, he wasn't just a pretty face. This guy had strategy. He realizes she's basically running in circles around this tree, and what does he do? He waits.
Gotta love it. Fuxi just chilling against a tree while Nüwa's wearing herself out. It's kind of funny, actually. But it also tells you something important about leadership, no matter who's in charge. Strategic thinking. He knew how to be efficient, save his energy, and that was key for surviving in a world that had just started over.
Work smarter, not harder, right? It's a little detail, but it shows you how much they valued strategy, patience, things a leader definitely needed back then. They were a team, meant to be. So they get hitched. The heavens have spoken. But here's where things took a turn. Nüwa doesn't exactly give birth to a bouncing baby. Instead, a giant ball of flesh.
Yeah, not your typical birth announcement. Makes you wonder what they considered a successful delivery back then.
A giant ball of flesh. Not exactly the stork delivery you expect.
Right. Not your typical baby shower gift. But you got to remember, myths, they're rarely ever literal, that fleshy blob. It's more about potential. Think humanity, raw and unshaped, just waiting for a purpose.
Good thing Fuxi came prepared. Imagine the world's oldest carving knife in his back pocket. One slice, boom. Humanity's greatest hits start popping out one after the other. All those little bits of flesh, bam, the first people kneeling there before their, shall we say, unconventional parents.
It's actually kind of similar to creation myths you find all over. The breath of life, right? Prometheus with his clay people. I think it points to this thing humans have always wondered about. Where did we come from? What's the point of it all? We're hardwired for that, I think.
Totally. But hold on, Nüwa wasn't done yet. Remember those complaints about overtime? Imagine being a goddess stuck with populating a whole planet. She needed a faster system, right? So what does she do? Grabs a rope, dips it in mud, starts swinging it around. Splat. More humans.
And here's where it gets interesting. Because that little myth, it lays the groundwork for a hierarchy right from the start. The handcrafted humans, the ones she took her time on, they become the elite, the rulers, the top dogs. Then you have the rope-splattered folks, destined for a life of hard work. It's like their fate was decided by which crafting method Nüwa felt like using that day.
Oh, for sure. Imagine blaming your problems on that. Sorry, no chariot for me. Nüwa went with the express delivery option for my ancestors.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
Not sure that excuse would hold up, though. But it shows you how much those ancient societies thought about fate, free will, why things were the way they were. They wanted answers, and sometimes those answers became these amazing stories.
Speaking of shaping society, Nüwa didn't just stop at making people. Now, Fuxi gets credit for all the practical stuff, yin and yang, fishing nets, that kind of thing. But Nüwa, she brought something else to the table. Marriage. And not the casual, let's hang out in this cave kind of deal. We're talking rules, commitment, the whole shebang. Expert speaker, why was this such a big deal back then?
Well, this is where that shift from a matriarchal society to a patriarchal one really starts to gain traction. Remember how we talked about survival being a huge concern? As humans evolved, so did how they, got food and stayed safe. At first, women, the gatherers, they had a lot of say in things. They kept everyone going. But then hunting got more sophisticated, bows and arrows, that kind of thing. Men took on a more dominant role in providing.
So instead of hoping that berry bush wasn't already claimed, men were bringing home the, let's say, the prehistoric equivalent of bacon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as men became the main food providers, things started to shift. Nüwa establishing marriage. It was a way to make sure women still had a place, still had rights and security, even though the rules were changing.
Like she could see where things were headed and decided to set some ground rules. All right, everyone, new system, marriage contracts, bride prices, the whole 9 yards, make it official.
And, a lot of those rules, they were there to protect women, the bride price. Sure, on the surface, it seems like buying a wife, but it also acknowledged her value, as a way to make sure she was taken care of, even as society shifted toward men having more control.
Makes you wonder if those first arguments between couples ever involved Nüwa's going to hear about this. But on a more serious note, this shift to a male-dominated world wasn't always smooth sailing. Q Gong Gong, our resident troublemaker, who was not on board with a woman calling the shots.
And that opposition to Nüwa, let's just say it had some explosive consequences.
Explosive. That might be an understatement. We're talking universe-level meltdown here, right?
It's like those myths take real anxieties and blow them up to epic proportions, And Gong Gong rebelling against Nüwa, that's a perfect example. It wasn't just about grabbing power. It's deeper than that. It was pushing back against the whole changing society thing, against women being in charge, He was holding on to the old ways tooth and nail.
And he really knew how to make a statement, that's for sure. We've all been there, right? Stub your toe, lose your keys, total bummer. But Gong Gong, this guy took it to a whole other level. Destroying altars, smashing astronomical platforms. Talk about a cosmic temper tantrum.
And those platforms, they were just decorations. People tracked the stars, the seasons, super important stuff for farming, knowing when to plant. Without them, total chaos. Floods, famine, the works.
Talk about self-sabotage, huh? It just goes to show you how important those early observations, understanding nature, all of that, it was life or death back then. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. Nüwa creates all these people, put so much effort in, and then, boom, you'd think she'd just want to take a very long nap after all that.
But she doesn't, and that's the thing about Nüwa. She was all about protecting, keeping things in balance. So what does she do? Steps right up to fix things. And this is where the myth gets really epic. Remember how much Gong Gong hated taking orders from a woman? Well, he decides to pick a fight with something a little more solid. Bazoo Mountain.
And not just any mountain, right? This was the mountain holding up the sky, apparently. Talk about a lot of pressure.
Seriously, right. One mountain for the whole sky. Makes you wonder about their construction methods back then. But it shows you, again, how important balance was to them. Messing with that balance. It wasn't just destructive. It was like unraveling the whole universe.
So did he, actually punch a hole in the sky?
You could say that. Gong Gong headbutts this mountain, and you got to imagine the scene, right? This is the god we're talking about. The whole sky tilts. Sun, moon, stars, all messed up. And of course, the floods start all over again.
Double whammy. I can just imagine Nüwa thinking, seriously, I just finished making humans. Can a goddess get a break?
But she gets right to work as always, collects all these different colored stones, and then, get this, she uses them to patch up the sky, uses her power, her creativity, to literally piece it back together. It's an incredible image, resilience, renewal, all of that. She really was committed to these humans, huh?
It's like the ultimate fixer-upper project, but instead of spackle and paint, she's using like cosmic power and a whole lot of willpower. And the good news, Nüwa was in it for the long haul. We're talking a lifespan of over a century. This goddess was playing the long game.
That extended lifespan. It wasn't just about living a long time. It meant wisdom, a deep understanding of how things work, and leaving your mark on the world. It makes you think about leadership, right? Strength and toughness are important, sure, but you also need that long-term vision, making sure things are good for generations to come.
Nüwa basically wrote the guidebook on how to run a civilization. So we're wrapping up our deep dive into Nüwa's world, and I gotta say, I'm feeling a little bit in awe of this goddess. It's a good reminder to maybe, not anger Mother Nature too much. But what really gets me is how relevant these ancient stories still feel. They're about human nature, the challenges of being in charge, and how powerful a good story can be.
Totally. They aren't just dusty old tales, they're alive. We keep retelling them, finding new meaning in them. Nüwa's story. It's about creation, picking yourself up after a disaster, finding balance. It makes you think about our role in all of this, building a good future, Because even when things seem impossible, there's always hope, always a chance to start over. And maybe, just maybe, a really awesome story to guide us along the way.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this. What myths do you carry with you? What stories shape how you see the world? Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.